Oh, okay. We're finally ready. After all that struggle to go connect a server, we're finally getting to that point. Alright. So I hope everyone had a good day so far. While we're here, I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about something. This is something like I want to say like is very impromptu. This isn't something like I planned on talking about, and like I didn't like get a chance to like write out some key points. So we're just gonna be like almost essentially just spitballing here. But I was watching some video, and as you guys might or probably should know by now, like I enjoy MMOs. Okay, I do consider myself to be a very casual fan of MMOs. I've streamed World of Warcraft on this stream. I've streamed Guild Wars too. I fucking love Guild Wars. Oh my gosh. Um, Scrub and I did the Rags to Rune Armor full send stream that one time. That was hilarious. I loved it. So like and like I play a lot of Final Fantasy 14 lately. So I think it's pretty safe to say that I'm a somewhat casual fan of MMOs. And I watch a lot of content creators for specific MMOs that I like. Specifically, one video that I found that kind of like really sort of inspired this whole thing was a video by a creator named Josh Strife Hayes. So if you guys don't know anything about like an MMO, like if you guys want like really good editorials, talking points, MMO reviews, I highly recommend Josh Strife Hayes. I love his channel. I will shill it until the end of time. But he made a video about why people quit MMOs. And basically in that video, it's talking about the game design points where players just tend to just basically say like, all right, that's it. This is the moment where I put this game down. Now, there's a lot of points that were in this video, some things that are just out of like game development control. Like, for instance, a person's life got in the way and they come back to the game and they're just not as interested as they once were. That is technically a moment where players put the game down and don't want to play anymore, right? But there are other things in game development that we can work on and that you can improve in order for the new player experience to not suck and for newer and more casual fans to actually enjoy the game. And that got me thinking, as things tend to do, about fighting games, the new player experience for fighting games. As you guys know, I'm a huge advocate of trying to make that experience as painless as possible because fighting games are a niche genre. They are not something that people really go out of their ways to play. Guilty Gear being a good example of that. This game is good as all hell. But I think like it just celebrated like 3 million a million copies sold worldwide, and that's like profound for this series. Something like that. I think 9 million was Mortal Kombat's numbers the first year or something like that. And that's not even like really all that crazy in just the realm of AAA development. Fighting games are a very niche genre. They need to do a lot to retain their viewers because not their viewers, their players, because if the players migrate, even better yet, like why would a kid or anybody that is just like a Call of Duty player, a Fortnite player, something like that, even in this case, like an MMO player, why would they want to come and play Guilty Gear? I mean, there's plenty of reasons for it, but how does this game make sure that the new player has a smooth and comfortable experience so that they want to continue to play this game? I think the majority of fighting games do not have good new player experiences at all. In fact, I think very few have a very good casual experience even after you've learned the game to some degree. I think the main gameplay loop of fighting games, which to be fair, the main thing that you do in fighting games is fight, right? That's the whole point of them. That's why they're fighting games. So obviously the game's going to be built around you fighting another opponent. But I think the problem is they're focused on just doing player versus player interactions and having fuck all for content outside of that is a huge problem. And probably one of the biggest reasons why people don't really stick with fighting games for very long, especially the casual fan base. And before anybody says it in chat, because I know it's going to happen at some point, I just want to remind you guys that while we're talking about this, I'm not talking about this from the perspective of you are a top level player or something like that. You're not Daigo Umehara or somebody else that is just a fighting game god, and we're not these are not the reasons why you would be quitting this game. These are strictly for someone who came home from work one day, only has 30 minutes to a couple hours to play the game, and they would rather spend those couple hours playing something else other than fighting games. Keep in mind that this isn't supposed to be about how high-level players view fighting games. This is just simply from a purely casual audience. The people that make up the majority of a game's player base, and the people that you do need to focus on when you are making fighting, like when you are trying to keep a core audience. Because there's, like, basically at that point, it's always just going to be a war of attrition. Alright? You're never going to be able to keep 100% of your user base. And the problem is, you want to do as much as you can to try to slow down the migration as much as possible. And I think fighting games do a really poor job at that. Just for example, like, let's go to the main menu real quick. Let's just say I bought the game. What is there specifically for me to do? We have arcade mode versus CPU battles. Sometimes there's this survival thing. The 2-player offline, and then you have the online. This story mode right here, very rarely in fighting games. Normally it's just the arcade mode. Lately there has been more attempts, but story's kind of hit or miss, right? Story's not necessarily what a person playing fighting games wants, but it's there not necessarily for people that are huge fighting game fanatics. It is there for the casual audience. And seeing how bare bones the, like, choice that you have what to do in a fighting game, that is honestly a moment right there where people just don't want to play fighting games. And again, I understand that people right now are probably thinking to themselves when hearing this, you know, like, well, fuck them. All right? It's a fighting game. That's what you're supposed to do, is fight. I'm not saying that they need to have, like, what was it, like Tekken Force mode, where it's just basically like a whole, like, arcade beat 'em up game in the actual game. I'm not saying you need to include that. What I am saying, though, is you need to include different game modes that are fun, that are more inventive than just your standard arcade mode. Arcade mode and survival mode are cool, I suppose. They don't really add to the casual experience. There is actually, in all honesty, zero reason to play fighting games single player offline. For the most part, there is none. And that right there is a huge turnoff to a lot of people. Not everyone has access to great internet. And as we'll get further down the line, if you play a game with really bad netcode, there's very little incentive to continue playing. Honestly, like, you do an arcade mode once or twice with your favorite character, you're probably not going to want to learn a whole new character to go through arcade mode again. The fact that most single player experiences are not meaningful at all in fighting games, besides the online, there really isn't a meaningful experience for offline single player content. Very rarely do you have a story mode that is robust. You have, what, NRS titles? That's about it. Technically, you can make the argument that something like Guilty Gear has a story mode or something to do other than, or like some sort of offline single player content that isn't arcade mode or some survival mode. But this is more like watching an anime than it really is playing the game. So, like, while I will 100% say that it is really cool that they have this, I don't think this necessarily adds to the offline single player experience. In my opinion, Guilty Gear story mode and story modes like this don't necessarily add to the value of the offline single player content, because you're watching a movie. You're not playing the game, you're watching a movie. I think one of the only developers that actually put in a meaningful story and make a meaningful attempt at an offline single player experience is NRS. That's it. NRS modes, you typically have, their arcade mode, which is like the tower mode, right? Then you have, as of late, the Crypt. That is something else that they've made that they've also expanded on from MKX to MK11. Then MK11 has the, Towers of Time mode, which is sort of meh. I mean, honestly, like, that's not very good considering how the old modes used to have, like, test your might, test your luck, mini games like that. I mean, like Mortal Kombat was a thing. NRS usually does have a kind of scary amount of offline single player content that is more geared towards casual players. And to be honest, it's not really that surprising why those games do really good. And in fact, if you think about it, I think the two top selling fighting games, and honestly, if this is, like, I don't have the statistics pulled out in front of me, so I might be wrong. The biggest one is still Smash by a long shot. I think Smash sold more than, like, Street Fighter 2. And the other big one that you have is Mortal Kombat. And what do those two games really have in common, in my opinion, that makes them like such a hot ticket item, other than just the IP being so recognizable, at least? Because again, Smash has the Nintendo characters IP. Mortal Kombat is pretty much just a legend in and of itself. I honestly think that the fact that those games have so much offline single player content, I think that's a huge reason why they do good. Smash, Melee, we'll just go off of Melee because that's the one that I played the most, right? Melee had like 2 or 3 different arcade runs that you could do, all different. You had like the classic mode, adventure mode, and then the all-star mode or something like that. You had the event mode, which is essentially just 99 different challenges you can do. Home run mode, they had target mode, where you'd have to go do just run through a course and try to smash like 10 targets within like a minute or something like that. And then after that, they had like different challenge modes, like the 10-man melee, unlimited melee, or like 10-minute melee, 50-man melee, 100-man melee, stuff like that. They had all these different offline things for you to do that they've only just expanded on. Brawl, I know, had a pseudo story mode. The point is that there is like somewhat of a meaningful offline experience for casual players that at least keeps them playing the game. It might not necessarily be online, but it keeps them playing the game. That's what's important. They still want to play the game. And honestly, the value of that might differ between people. But again, for a general sweeping statement, I think it adds a lot to the value of the game for the majority of people. So that's something that I think fighting games should really improve on. And you don't necessarily need to go all out on this. I think if this game were to have a character trial mode, that would really be nice, because that's sort of like a challenge mode in and of itself. I think trial modes kind of suck if they're tutorials, but I think trial modes are still good just to like get your hands on the character, see what they're like. Maybe you find out that this character isn't for you, but it's also just a challenge to do. I appreciate the fact that it's a challenge. I don't like when they use trials mode as a tutorial. I think that part sucks. Not having enough meaningful offline single player content, I believe that is a big moment where people just drop fighting games in general. The next thing, the fact that the majority of fighting games do not have a meaningful tutorial. I think that is another big moment where people drop the game. And again, that is something heavily debated on whether or not like you need a tutorial, because why aren't you in training mode just figuring it out? That should be all the tutorial you need. Yes and no. I think you don't necessarily need to make your tutorial just simply up is jump, back is block, down back to block lows, stuff like that. That stuff should be given in any tutorial. Like your tutorial shouldn't be just that. How about that? Your tutorial shouldn't just be hold up to jump, back to block, down back to block lows, here's the 6 attack buttons, or however many attack buttons that you have. And it shouldn't be presented just as a wall of text or something incredibly boring. I think even like this game's mission mode, which is technically the game's tutorial, right? It has a varying degree of difficulty and a bunch of different missions that you can do that are supposed to explain the mechanics of this game. But if you think about it, there's 16 here, 18 on this one, another 18 here. We're already over like 50 missions that you have to get through. That's throwing us closer to 90. We're over 100. Easily over 100 missions that you have to do to explain the system mechanics of this game. That's a lot. That is a lot to expect a new player that has never played a fighting game in their life to just dive through. It's very dense. It's a very dense amount of content. Having a tutorial in your game is nice, but also having it being digestible enough for a new player is incredibly important. Because as a new player, you see something like that, you're probably going to get bored very quickly and just fuck off and do something else. That is a quit moment. And I'll tell you that a great example, and I really hate to bring them up a second time, but NRS does a wonderful job at doing character tutorials. And the reason why is because their story mode is actually, and at least I suspect this, a secret character tutorial. It doesn't tell you how to play the game, but if you've noticed, anytime you play a NRS style story mode, what they do is you play a character through a certain chapter, right? As that chapter goes along, the fights increasingly get harder. The AI starts to behave differently. There are certain challenges that you have to do during that match. or that part of the story where you're playing the game. And what it is it tells you like, hey, do Johnny Cage's flip kick like 5 times, or something like that. Or in the case of Injustice, it was do Superman's eye lasers to hit the cars that are being thrown at you. Or I don't know if it was Superman or not, but like the point is like those things right there are so good at trying to make a tutorial and disguising it as a story mode. That is very good. It introduces you to characters, it introduces you to the motions of the special moves that you have to do, and it shows you what those special moves are, and it allows players to practice doing them. So like Bane throwing cars at Superman, I don't remember if this is the exact thing that they were doing, but you like, oh hey, you have to do eye lasers, you do it by doing down forward X or whatever, and then you just do that. Why is that not a thing in more games? I already think that we should have something like a story mode in in fighting games. It doesn't need to be robust, it doesn't need to be ridiculously long, like a 60-hour experience or something as incredibly in depth as Mortal Kombat or other NRS stories, but I think it should be there. And what's nice about having that story mode is you can disguise it as a tutorial mode. I think that when you just have a tutorial being a wall of text, you might as well just not have it at all. And if you're going to have trials be a pseudo tutorial, especially character trials being this is how the character works, you need to make that tutorial engaging for the player so they actually take some information away. How many times have you seen people just run through character trials or something? Like in Exarch, when you can do the character trials, you just run through that. Most of the time they try to tell you something important to the character, but it's just a wall of text. It doesn't really resonate well with the player, especially a casual player who might not understand certain fighting game terminology. It doesn't like hold any real value to them. And then once they see that the game might have a tutorial, that's fine, but they'll get bored of it and then they just won't play it anymore. Tutorials are actually really important, but the way that you do a tutorial is just as important as it being there. I always praise Killer Instinct for having a really wonderful tutorial because it breaks down the game's mechanics, no matter how complex they might have been. It breaks it down into digestible explanations, but I will always criticize it for just being a wall of text. That's a quit moment for most people. They don't want to do that tutorial because it doesn't really teach them anything. It just bores them. So then they don't play it. On the flip side of that, not having a tutorial and just having a training mode, that sucks. That is seriously the worst. When you just throw a training mode at someone and just saying, hey, just explore in that, figure it out. They don't know what to explore. That's bad. And then speaking of which, now that we're going into this. All right, so while we're in training mode, let's go talk about training mode features. Should be in training mode. They have a message at the bottom saying YouTube it. So here's something that Guilty Gear does really well. So most fighting game command lists don't include like this stuff, right? The like inputs for different or various moves, right? And then the special move stuff. And then like always supers, right? But what I think Guilty Gear does way better than anything else is if you go to like, let's just say like Leo's 6P, right? It tells you that this attack has upper body invulnerability and it's a good anti-air. And then it shows a video of you using it as an anti-air. So that actually gives you an explanation of what it is and some context with it. And they do that with literally every single move in this whole thing. I think this is awesome. And I really wish more fighting games would do this. I actually kind of hope more fighting games do this because this is wonderful from a new player perspective. If you don't know anything about your character, just these simple explanations right here on like what to use, and like they give like a suggestion on how to use that move. You can find out where these moves should actually be used. This is very important. Not having this and just seeing all this stuff is okay, but it's bare bones. And then what this game does even better is it explains generic system mechanics, right? It even goes as far as to say like what Gatling is. It doesn't tell you what the Gatling roots are, but it still tells you what Gatling is, right? And then it shows you an example. But yeah, so I think having an explanation here and not to an outside source is great. It's really good for new players. A main problem that most fighting games have is that once you're in training mode, it's incredibly bare bones. This game doesn't have a frame data display. Almost every modern fighting game has it in some facet. We're not going to talk about how Tekken almost forces you to pay for it. Aside from a mod, Tekken almost forces you to pay for in-game frame data. We're not going to talk about that because that is the most bullshit thing Bandai Namco has ever done that everyone just was like, it's cool, support developers. No, fuck you, okay? That should be a feature in every trading mode, including this game. Let me just point that out. It should be in this game too. But at the same time, all that stuff is great. All of these settings are great if you know how to use them already. A new player looking at this means nothing to them. Training mode is wonderful to solve questions, but it is not good. Like, it is good to find answer or solutions to problems, but it is terrible at explaining anything else. I just want people to understand that too about training modes in fighting games. It is not for discovering, like, it generally isn't for discovering new thing. Like, if I really wanted to, like, learn the Soul matchup, right? And I've never played against a Soul. It is not for that. It is for when I find out that Soul is just beating my ass with Far Slash, how do I develop a strategy against Far Slash? That's what training mode is actually for. And once that kind of clicks in your head, that's when you're like, oh shit, training mode is actually used for that, not just me to practice combos. But the problem is, again, fighting games don't explain that. And once you're in training mode as a new player, you experience choice paralysis. That is something that if you've ever played an MMO, the first time you ever play an MMO and are given no direction at all, there's no plot line, main story quest for you to follow, something like that, it just kind of tosses you in a world and it's like, go on, do it. This is the equivalent. You just hop into training mode and you're just like, okay, buttons? That is the same thing. That is absolutely the same thing, and that sort of choice paralysis is a quit moment in MMOs, and therefore it's a quit moment in fighting games. You're presented with a whole ton of information, all of this stuff right here. You're not sure what any of this shit does, okay? You're like sitting here like, what the fuck is a blue psych burst? Or something like that, and you're like, I don't know. That sort of moment where you're just completely confused, that's a quit moment. And actually, even before that, let's talk about something else that I would consider a quit moment. Character design is actually incredibly important, and I will stand and die on that hill. If you play a fighting game where you don't think any of those characters really resonate with you, you're gonna put that game down immediately. For instance, I absolutely love almost every single design in Guilty. I will say every single one of these characters in this game are designed, like, beautifully. I mostly play Leo just because, like, that's a character I'm most familiar with, but, like, everyone just has wonderful character design. But there is a reason why I stick to characters that I usually play. I play Leo because he's a rushdown character. That, like, makes sense. Soul, rushdown character. Grappler, these are all characters that I'm used to playing. Character design is really important because you're like, when you don't know anything about any character, the first thing you're going to do is pick a character that, like, resonates with you. It might be because they have a certain play style that you like. So you're going to start filtering characters through that. But ultimately, the character that you pick is going to be a character that you think looks fucking cool. Because you're going to be staring at them for hours and hours on end. You're going to want to pick a character that you think looks sick as hell. So it's very important to have a cast of characters that can at least appeal to a wide variety of interests. Let's look at this because, okay, no, you know what? No, we need to we need to actually pull this up because there's only one way I can do this. All right, so here's my hot take. You're now looking at the Melty Blood characters. A lot of you guys might have heard of this game, Melty Blood, and the meme that none of their characters have any drip. You guys might have heard of this game not having any fucking drip at all. Look at this. This is just a dude in a schoolboy outfit. So, here's the thing. Melty Blood is really fun to play. I will 100% give it that. 100% I can see why everyone's like, these characters' designs are fucking dumb. Alright? Because these characters weren't designed to be fighting game characters. Okay? They're from like a manga or webcomic or something. I'm not entirely sure about the lore of Melty off the top of my head. But like, I totally understand why they're like, these motherfuckers are dripless. I get where these memes come from. Look at this. These aren't like badass characters. This is a fucking school child with a knife. And look, you can play as a maid in that game. There's maids. You can be a maid or like some like schoolboy. But what I'm saying is like all those memes about how like these motherfuckers dripless or whatever, or all those jokes about multi-blood character designs. Yeah, like the fucking Hank Hill meme right here in this thumbnail. Look at this bitch. Look at this bitch. She got that Hank Hill outfit. There's a lot of memes that revolve around Melty Blood. I'll be perfectly honest. And they're fucking hilarious. Don't get me wrong. But like, that is a wonderful example. That is a wonderful example of just some, like, if a fighting game character design doesn't resonate with you, you're not going to play it. But the point that I'm getting at is like, the character design is very important. If you don't have a character that like you can latch onto or something, or you don't think character designs look good, you're not going to want to play that game. Okay, you're not going to want to play it at all. In fact, that is probably one of the main reasons why I don't play like DOA. I don't play Uni. I don't play like shit like that, because like I don't find any of their characters interesting. I don't. I mean, don't get me wrong, DOA plays really fun. It is actually like a really fun game. But, you know, like I don't really like the like I'm not a fan of DOA characters. The majority of them I don't think are very fun. All right, some people might be into like the jiggle physics of DOA 5. I really don't give a shit about that. To be perfectly honest, I don't. Versus like a Tekken or whatever. Those characters look fucking awesome in my opinion, especially King. That's why I play him. That motherfucker's cool as shit. Character design is a huge important role in keeping people attached to the game. If you don't have good character design, or people think that you don't have good character design, they throw that bitch out. Look at all the jokes that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite got with how butt ugly Dante and Chun-Li look. That stopped a lot of people from buying that game right there. Immediately stopped a ton of people right there. That was the roadblock. Chun-Li looked dumb. Dante looked fucking demented. So that is a big reason why people didn't play those games. And also, while we're on the subject of like the way the game actually plays, right? Let's talk about like combos and combo mechanics. Now, this is where things are going to get you're going to quit no matter what in this instance. And I completely understand that, because there's absolutely no way to satisfy the majority of people. First of all, infinite combos and shit like that, broken ass shit from like Marvel 2 and Marvel 3, that gets a lot of people to quit right there. And I can actually attest to this from a personal experience. I was a young boy at one time with the ripe age of like 12. I'm over at my buddy's house and I see them playing a game, and this game looked fucking cool as shit. The visuals on screen, there's a lot of like beams getting thrown across, lights flashing, you know, like the game was over the top. It was a game called Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Now, if you guys know anything about me, I fucking love Marvel. Marvel 3 was like probably one of my favorite fighting games from like the 09er era, besides Street Fighter 4. Those are the only two fighting games I really played. So I have a very, like, I literally would go home and play Marvel for like 6 hours with my friend almost every day. That's how much we played Marvel 3. Almost every day we'd grind out like over 100 games. That's what me and him did. It was fucking awesome. So you guys know I love Marvel 3. But I never picked up a Marvel game for the longest time, because my first experience with Marvel vs. Capcom, I don't know anything about this game. My buddy, I'm like, yo, let's play. And he's like, you don't want this. My boy Paco is telling me you don't want it. I'm like, fuck you. Let's play. And he's like, you're going to get smoked. I'm not going to go easy on you. I was like, I don't want you to. Let's fucking play this game. It looks dope as shit. I'll learn. So Paco proceeds to fucking Hyper Viper loop the shit out of me, which if you guys don't know is an infinite. I can't touch it. We play like 12 games straight. I don't touch, like, I get like perfect, like so many times. I could not touch him. I was so mad. That was one of the worst experiences I've ever had playing a fighting game. Okay? It was awful. I was just locked in an infinite combo, or like locked in block stun. I couldn't move. I didn't know any of the game's mechanics. He did, which absolutely demolished me. I didn't play Marvel again until I was 16. For 4 years, I didn't play that game. That's how pissed off I got. I was telling everybody, I was like, Marvel vs. Capcom is a trash-ass game. Who the fuck thought it was a good idea to let games have infinite combos? Or just combos that don't end? The game's cheap as fuck. I eventually learned that since everything is cheap in that game, nothing is cheap at all, and I would learn to love it, but it took me so long to get to that point for me to even reconsider trying that game. That's a quit moment. When your combos go on for that long, people feel like they don't get a turn to play the game. They don't want to play the game at all. When your game feels like you're more playing a turn-based RPG than a fighting game, you throw it out. And on the flip side, combos that are too difficult to pull off. Let's look at Street Fighter 4 from that same era. You guys know I am a huge Street Fighter 4 fan. We all know how much I like simp for that game. But I completely understand now, as an adult, I get why people didn't like that game and its combo system. One frame links were fucking stupid. Who decided to put that in a game? A one frame link is ridiculous. Ridiculous to pull off consistently, at least. And as much as people tried to downplay one frame links, it was pretty much every character had at least one that you had to learn. But you pretty much had to deal with that every character. There was no getting away from it. You had to get good at it. You had to learn how to do it. And it just the perceived notion that one frame links were just this difficult thing that you had to learn really stopped people from playing the game. Not to mention, the combo system in general is what made people not pick that game up because they thought it was too difficult. It wasn't just the one frame links. It wasn't just one frame links, but doing links in general really made people not want to play that game. I know plenty of people that were just I'd rather play something like Marvel vs. Capcom where you just do the magic series. I don't want to have to time buttons so hyper specific. That was actually a huge reason why my friend that I played Marvel with, that's why we played Marvel. He didn't want to have to learn links. And I know he could have just sat down and tried to, but he wasn't up for it. That just wasn't what he wanted. So that's another reason why people quit the games, is their combo mechanics. Either you have infinite combos and that it turns people off because they don't want to have to just sit and stare at a screen. They want to actively play the game. Or you have combo mechanics that are just too difficult. And on the flip side, making your game too easy, making more veteran players feel like the game has already been solved. They don't want to play the game. Just look at what happened with Guilty Gear Strive. A lot of people criticize this for just being a simple, dumbed-down version of all the other Guilty Gear games. They would rather play something like Exart or Plus R that had more depth. When your game is too simple, Guilty Gear being one of the main examples, people fucking hate that for some reason. The game's too easy. The skill ceiling isn't high enough. It feels like they've already solved the game too fast and that there isn't much left to learn. You're just running through the motion. We had that same complaint with Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V was too simple. They had 8-frame buffer that you could do, which was insane. They took out one frame links and people were upset about that. They were like, the combos are too simple. You could already figure out what the max damage combo route was with everyone. And the game really didn't have a whole lot of depth to it to where you couldn't develop certain strategy. It just felt like it was pretty simple to figure out what the best answer was in the scenario because it was so clear, because there wasn't a whole lot of mechanical depth to the game. That is a quit moment. That gets veteran players to quit the game. You need to have a balance between a combo system that doesn't necessarily make you sit there and watch, so you can't have long running combos for the most part. You can't have a combo system that is so in-depth that it stops casuals from being able to play the game, and you can't have a combo system that's just so easy that veteran players don't even feel like it is worth picking up. And not even just the combo system, the mechanics in general can't be too difficult to where people feel like they don't understand them, and it can't be so easy that it feels like this is just the best option very clearly in this given scenario. Solving a game very quickly is great, but it gets boring very quickly. And also not being able to find out what optimal routes are just kind of make people feel like this game is just too difficult. Like I said, it's a balancing act. No one has ever gotten it perfect, but it just all comes down to personal tastes. Your game mechanics being too complex is a quit moment, but at the same time, your game mechanics being too simple is a quit moment for most people. Trying to find that balance is important, because you don't want to alienate people that can't dedicate as much time to learn the game, but at the same time, you don't want to alienate the people that want to sink their teeth into more. And at the same time, that also goes hand in hand with the game's balance. When people feel like a character is dominating the meta, they don't want to play the game because they feel like they don't get a choice in the character that they play. For instance, do you know how many people bitch about Sol? A lot of people. For the most part, it's kind of justified. Sol is very strong in this game. Do I think a lot of people just need to learn the matchup? Absolutely. But Sol's very strong in this game. He's a big problem to deal with. When you hear that Sol is just this dominating character, he's so good, his far slash hits from a million miles away, his 6S in the Gunflame is like plus 1,000 on block. Yeah, that's going to make you not want to play the game because you're going to be like, your thought is going to be, well, if I don't play Sol, I'm just not going to be able to be competitive. That's a quit moment. Your game needs to have good enough balance to where it feels like you can pick whatever character that you want and have relative success with them. Obviously, the higher you go into the actual depth of this game, in any game in general, the higher you go into the skill level, the more you kind of have to start leaning towards picking a top tier. But if your character that you really like isn't good and you feel like that it's pretty much just an uphill battle, you're going to feel like that game just isn't worth your time. So you're going to quit it, right? You're going to go play a different game where it doesn't feel like that you have to choose a better character. You get to play the way that you want to play. That is basically universal throughout every single game. If you have your meta dominated by one single option, sure, that works fine for the people that want that or want to play that way, but it doesn't really work well for other people. For instance, again, let's say Sol, and then you can have like someone that wants to play like Faust or something. It is an uphill battle playing Faust pretty much against anybody. If you really want to play Faust and the only real viable option is Sol, that doesn't make you want to play the game at a casual level. It just makes it feel like if you're not playing Sol, you're not going to have fun. Character balance is a very important thing that a lot of developers work really hard on, and to some effect, they do really well at it. Sometimes. You have certain games where the balance... I actually shouldn't even say sometimes. The majority of the time, the game figures itself out, so to speak, whether it's patching the game or various other means, like the meta develops and they find out that this character might not be as strong as they are. But it doesn't undo the damage that having an overpowered character does. It's too late by the time a developer notices that, which is why games try to come as balanced as possible. They want you to feel like you have the freedom of choice. Now, since we're also on the subject of online, if your game does not have good online, that is an immediate quit moment for multiple reasons. I don't know how many people have dealt with this, but the very first month the very first week this game came out, almost unplayable online. Actually, to the point where I almost stopped playing this game. I almost didn't want to continue playing this game because I was so frustrated at how bad the experience of trying to play this game was. The connection to the network was so unstable. It would kick you all the way back to main menu. And then you'd have to go through upwards of 5 minutes of connecting to server. It was so ridiculous to deal with. I didn't want to deal with it. That almost right there was my quit moment for this game. Thankfully, I am patient enough because I was really determined to play this when it got announced, because I wanted to get into a Guilty Gear game, when it started. I was so determined to play this game that I was willing to sit through the absolute trash experience of day one for this game, where the servers were just so congested that it was basically impossible to play this game. And not to mention, the dual station thing still happens. The failed to connect to dual station or whatever, the dual station error is such a problem. It's so annoying. It is something that I can see why people don't want to play this when that's the experience that they have. That is absolutely ridiculous that this game would have that experience still. And while we're on the subject of how your net play works, and I don't know why this is something that I have to say, and honestly, every single developer that is going to try to make a fighting game better listen, because that's how ridiculous this is. I don't understand how you can be a AAA developer, work on a fighting game for multiple years, go through all the effort to implement or have a design for an online lobby or something like that, or go through all the effort to creating the online mode, and it be fucking trash. Okay? How does that happen? How do you not do things that, especially, oh my god. I know this is going to sound like a broken record as far as everyone is concerned. And I know it's one of those like tag words that everyone hates now. But how do you not put rollback in every single one of your games? I don't understand how netcode and netplay has been a solved issue since 2013 when Killer Instinct released. How we still have games that are just like, yeah, this new fighting game that we, the AAA studio, are going to be making will not be featuring rollback netcode. Samurai Showdown does not have rollback netcode. And when we port it to the PC after years of it not having it, we're going to make no changes to the netcode. We're going to just ship it as is. And then people wonder why their games die so quickly. It's because no one wants to play a game where it feels unplayable to play online. This is such a simple thing that so many developers have gotten wrong. If you're going to put rollback, it needs to be implemented properly. Street Fighter V, I'm looking at you. All right? It has rollback. It was just poorly implemented, and it doesn't work. It makes the netplay suck, and that's a huge complaint. Virtua Fighter 5, the remake for it, that game looks so fucking cool. It works depending on what part of the world you live in. It doesn't work everywhere. That's where the meme of racist netcode came in, because it technically doesn't work if you're not in a predominant, or like the US, Canada, UK, something like that, or like certain parts of Europe. I don't get it. I really do. It boggles the mind how we are in 2021 right now. Something that was created 8 years ago, a game that was created 8 years ago, still has better netplay than modern day fighting games, and still has a better netplay experience than most modern fighting games. Don't get me wrong, a thing like this with the dual stations and stuff is a cool idea, but if it doesn't work, what it is just a cool set piece. It absolutely adds no value, and in fact takes away from the value of the game. Yeah, it's awesome that I can create this avatar and go around and go up to the dual station, and it's sort of like that arcade experience where you like go up to someone that's playing on the cabinet and you guys play together, something like that. It sort of emulates that experience, but there's no point in having that experience if it just comes out playing like shit. What is the point in having a little avatar that I can run around if I can't even get into a match? That's dumb. That is really dumb. It's such a small thing that I don't understand why it's still a conversation that we have this late in the game. We all know that rollback works. We all know that it is preferable to delay-based netcode because it hides bad connections better. I don't know why there is still a worry that something like the new King of Fighters isn't going to have it. Or there's a worry that Melty Blood might not have it. Or something like that. I don't get it. I don't get why that's a conversation that needs to be had. It shouldn't. Like, it is not a conversation that anybody should be having right now. It should be in the game at the very least. You can improve upon that system, or try to improve upon that system, but that should be the groundwork that you work on. I don't understand why that is such a controversial statement. And then I really don't get why people just meme about it. Like, everyone's like, oh, it has rollback, so you must buy it. Shut the fuck up. Seriously. Don't take away from the importance of having good online. That is probably one of the biggest things that stop people from playing your game. Samurai Showdown, literally unplayable online. That is what stopped a lot of people from getting it. It's such a frustrating thing to have to argue with people about, because the main argument that I get from people when we talk about this is, oh, well, fighting games are played offline in tournaments and stuff like that. So we should worry about the offline mode being as good as possible, because as long as you have offline mode, you can still play the game. That works wonderfully if you have an offline scene nearby. That's it. That works wonderfully if you have an offline scene nearby. But not everybody has that, and not everybody's interested in playing in tournaments. So therefore, in order to appeal to a large audience, you need to have certain things, like having a functional netcode. And not having that functional netcode, and deliberately not putting in that, is a quit moment even before the game releases. The moment you hear about a game not having rollback netcode or something, that instantly loses players. Instantaneously. That is how important having functional netcode is. And the fact that that is still an argument or a discussion that we need to have is ridiculous. You want to talk about why it's so hard to get people into fighting games? It's because it's literally impossible to play them sometimes. It is a gamble on whether or not. Like, you have to cross your fingers that when they announce a new fighting game, that it's gonna have good net play. And honestly, you would think that after COVID last year, more developers would be like making that a priority to talk about. Not a lot of them do. It took a lot to get SNK to even mention having rollback in King of Fighters 15. It took so much effort to convince ArcSys to put rollback in Strive. You know why I don't play DBFZ anymore? Because I can never, like, I've had a handful of stable connection games in that game. That's so bad. And also, while we're on the subject, if you have to jump through hoops just to play the game, no one wants to play it. Street Fighter V actually does this probably the best out of any game. You go into training mode, you press start, you go to the matchmaking queue, turn on ranked or unranked, or both. You can turn both of them on. Go back into training mode. Practice all you want. The game notifies you when it finds somebody. You play the game, you leave. You go back to training mode, and the game does that again. You never, ever, ever have to even go into the online ranked queue. You never have to see it. You can queue from training mode. That is such a good system, and it's something that when I realized, like, I never realized how much I loved it until I played something like Guilty Gear Strive. I think that is honestly one of the biggest whiffs of this game is the hoops you have to jump through just to play online. Connecting to servers or network communications that take 5 minutes to get through. That'll stop anyone from playing this game. They don't want to have to wait so long to play it. Going through the confusing lobby system when you have to pick a region just to be in, and then you have to go to the floor system, find a duel station. Why can't you just be in training mode and queue for a ranked match or queue for an offline match? If you don't want to do the floor system, you shouldn't have to. And then sometimes even when you're in the floor or whatever and you go to like standby in training mode instead of having to go sit at one of these duel stations, sometimes the game literally tells you you can't do that. We have too many simultaneous simulations happening at once. That's annoying as fuck. I just want to play the game. Don't make me playing the game difficult. If that part gets difficult, people don't want to play. It's simple as that. And I don't understand why that is just something that, like, this game especially just completely whiffs. As for all the shit that people give Street Fighter V, Street Fighter V probably has the best experience, hands down, with getting you into a game. I don't think there is any other fighting game that I can think of off the top of my head that has any better of an experience than that. Because, and this is something else that I should add, or this is something else I feel like I need to add, having a region select, or having a ranked or a connection filter, or something like that, or being able to see the connection before you even enter the game, that is something so important. You don't want to play bad games. You don't want to jump into a game, realize that this person has like 300 milliseconds of ping, there's 8 frames of rollback, or whatever. The game's like, rollback can only fix so much. That is terrible connection. That's not fun. No one wants to play that match. And it would be really nice if there was a way that I could either vet that from that even becoming a possibility as much as possible, or a way that I can see what their connection to me looks like, and I just say, I don't want this match. That would be so nice if this game were to have it, but it doesn't, and I don't understand why it wouldn't. When there are so many games that do that, they tell you the region that they're from, they tell you their connection to you. This game does not do that at all. It just shows you the R-code card that they have, and then it's a gamble. That is absolutely a quit moment for fighting games, and that is something, again, very important. Anything to do with online, realistically, should be done as well as possible, because this is the main game mode people are going to be playing. This should be the smoothest experience anybody has to playing this game. But some games, it's just like pulling teeth. It's not going to make people want to play the game. In fact, it's going to make them want to play something else that has a better experience. That's what happened to me for the first week this game came out. I just didn't play it. I went to go play Street Fighter V because it was just that much easier to find games in Street Fighter V than it was in this. And I think that is something that you really need to consider when you're trying to market your fighting game or trying to get your fighting game to appeal to as many people as possible. You need to consider, hey, is this online even going to be good? Or does this online experience make sense? Is it painless to new players? Because it should be. It should not be a pain in the dick to play the game. But yeah, so like, those are honestly just like a handful of moments that I can think of off the top of my head that would make someone just be like, fighting games just aren't for me. And those are just the things that happen in the game. There's a ton that happen outside of the game. Much like when you stop an RPG or you stop an MMO for months on end, right? You come back and you're just completely confused with what this game is. What happened? What's going on? You don't know. That confusion happens every time you stop playing a game and you come back during a balance patch. The game is completely changed. Your character might not even operate the same way that you remember that character working. That's a quit moment.
Are you ready?
Stuff like that happens all the time. Maybe characters got better. A matchup that you thought you knew changes. Stuff like that. When that happens, people just don't want to play anymore. I am very guilty of that. I drop a lot of games like right after like DLC characters drop because it's different or new balance patches come out. Like I stopped playing Mortal Kombat right after a balance patch came out or like a new update came out because it wasn't the same game that I played. But yeah, so there's like a ton of quit moments that you can think of. And honestly, some of them might just seem very nitpicky, so to speak. Some people might not see them as being a big deal, whether or not it's because that doesn't necessarily apply to you or to the skill bracket you're in. But these are still things that a wide variety of people do tend to quit fighting games over, or tend to not be interested in fighting games because of that. But anyways, like your whole goal as a developer is to try to eliminate as many of those quit moments as possible. And these are something that is predominantly in fighting games for as long as I have been into fighting games. And it seems like very little gets done to try to fix this to make the newcomer experience fun, to make it engaging and good. That's not something that fighting games typically have, is a good new player experience. Typically what happens is you either need to go to a third-party source to get basic information as a new player, or you just need to be lucky and have a mentor. But yeah, anyways, so like, thank you for indulging my rant. I know it's not like it's one of those things that like basically saying that you as a consumer of fighting games are treated like shit by the people that make them. And we put like fighting game developers on such a high pedestal, almost to the point of like do no wrong. And to just basically say like, yeah, they should be doing better.